Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. This episode is going to be the start of a new season. In some ways, it's a logical progression of every season that we've discussed so far. And I guess I say that at the beginning of every season pretty much, because I think everything is very interconnected, and I get to these points because of everything that's come before, so it feels very interconnected. Yet in other ways, this particular season is sort of a predecessor to it all. It's kind of, sort of, at least one of the main ideas that was at the root of what has led me down the path that I'm on. It's something that I've very frequently come back to over the years, and something that I've long thought about and researched. So in this season, I want to explore the problem of suffering and evil. Now, like I said, the problem of evil is something that I have been thinking about for a long time, much longer than the issue of nonviolence. I have long been fascinated with the origin of evil, with things like theodicies, why does God allow evil, and all the things that go along with that. In fact, it was really my exploration of moral conundrums, which is one facet of the problem of evil. What makes something good? What makes something evil? What is morality? And everything that goes with it. It was exploring those moral conundrums and trying to figure out, like, what is it? What is evil? What does it mean to do something that's wrong? What does it mean to be moral? That paved the way for me to realize my adherence to the ethic of consequentialism and how antithetical that was to the character of Christianity and the heart of Christ's moral ethic. And realizing that I was a big consequentialist, but my community was hugely consequentialist, whatever they were. And so that realization, of course, is what led me to see and accept the ethic of nonviolence, when I recognized that it's not about the ends justifying the means, but it's about faithfulness over perceived effectiveness. At the same time, while thinking about morality and evil was a vital preparation for me to be able to embrace nonviolence, and in that way it preceded my exploration of nonviolence and kind of made that possible for me, it's also something which, after discussing nonviolence and consequentialism and government and all the other topics that we've discussed in this podcast, it's something that we have to come face to face with and evaluate again, or at least I do. I guess for you, maybe it's not something that you've ever really explored before, but for me, I feel like I have to come face to face with it again, because I've taken a long journey by looking at all the evils of government, of lying and propaganda, of violence, wars, all those things. And now, okay, what am I going to do with all of that evil and all of that faithfulness, and getting God off the hook, as a lot of people like to say it, in terms of why we have a world filled with evil today. And that's going to be important to evaluate, especially in the light of this being a podcast focused on nonviolence, because if evil exists and the Christian ethic really calls us to seemingly capitulate to evil, that's how other people will view it. What, you're not going to do anything? You're not going to vote? You're not going to pursue governmental power? You're just going to stand there and let your family get killed? You're going to let tyranny run all over you? Right? You're capitulating to evil. That's the view. If I'm advocating that we need to refuse violent action, we need to refuse deceitful and manipulative tactics like propaganda or the pursuit of imperial power, then there are going to be many days where we ask ourselves, why? What is this all for? Why is it this way in the first place? And is this really what morality and being ethical and Christ-like, is that really what it looks like to feel like you're doing and accomplishing nothing? I mean, why would God create a world where evil would arise and not just arise, but abound. He failed to snuff it out, or he refused to. And why are we in a world where when he doesn't snuff it out, he calls his people to bear the cost and to live a life that that is so predictable? He can predict that you will suffer persecution if you live ethically. He says you will face persecution if you follow him. You'll face hardship. You will have to daily take up your cross. Would a good God really do that? How could he do that and still be called good? What does it really mean to be good anyway? Like, can we still call things good in any meaningful way if that's what good looks like? Will it really be worth it in the end? And does the end really justify these means? Now, I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to answer all of the questions you are going to have about the problem of evil and suffering. And in fact, this season is going to be much more of an exploration of the many facets of the issue rather than a dogmatic exploration of how Derek says things really are. You know, I don't have some secret knowledge or wisdom that I can impart to you on this. So don't go in with super high expectations. Like, set your expectations where they need to be. This is much less of an apologetic season and more of an exploration where hopefully we can expand our vision to give us a bigger picture of God, of humanity, of our calling, of purpose, of telos, right? What we're moving towards, and of ultimate good and redemption. My hope is not that I will have answered the problem of evil or satisfied your yearning for the meaning of it all. Nothing we can discuss this season will mitigate the pain of suffering that each of us has endured in various ways, or the pain that we will inevitably endure until we eventually die. But sometimes a greater understanding, a broader vision can give us greater endurance. You know, when I ran long distance, it wasn't ever super long, but 16 miles, I think, was the longest I ever ran. But when I would run, the very first time that I would run a route, it always felt like it took so long. You know, I knew that I would do, I could do 6 miles in like 40 minutes or 45 minutes, 45 minutes. But when I ran a new route, if I mapped something out on like Map My Run or something back in the day, and I would go and run it for the first time, that 45 minutes felt like an hour and a half. It was just really long. But when I ran it over and over again, it felt much shorter. And that's because when I was running, at least one of my strategies was that I would mentally get to the next point. Be like, okay, just make it to that red barn. Great. All right, make it to the top of this hill. And then after I make it to the top of the hill, I'd be like, okay, make it to whatever, pick a landmark. And so the course was broken up into a lot of different segments in my mind. And I knew which segments were coming up, and I knew which goals I had to achieve. And I knew what to expect after I passed the red barn. I knew what to expect on the next leg of the journey. And that made my experience of the run much more endurable because I knew what to expect. And so I perceived time very differently and suffering, because long distance running, while it is fun in a certain sense, it is something that you have to endure for sure. I think that analogy applies here, right, for the topic that we're discussing. Knowing who we are, how God is and who he is, what he has called us to, and the purpose of suffering and the telos of it all, that can provide us with the hope and therefore the endurance to live our lives as they were intended to be lived. We know what's coming up on the next leg of our journey. For us to be truly fulfilled by pursuing our purpose, we really need to have hope. And to have hope, you have to have faith, for sure, but an understanding of what that faith is being placed in, or who that faith is being placed in. Now, in the first part of this season, I'm not actually going to be dealing directly with the problem of evil itself. In fact, I'm going to be spending a lot of time setting the stage for the problem of evil, discussing a topic that people either love discussing or hate discussing, it seems. We're going to spend quite a few episodes discussing the will and whether or not it is free, as most people understand the term free in a libertarian sense. Now, many people, and especially many Christians, assume that we have a libertarian free will. So they just don't think that the issue needs to be discussed. If Christianity is true, the will is free. And even if you don't think Christianity is true, a lot of people think that we have a libertarian free will. And honestly, many people are convinced that the topic is just a really philosophical nonsense that doesn't merit discussion at all. Who cares about the discussion of free will? We all know that we're free, and we all treat others as though they're free, so to discuss the will just seems pointless. Now, I definitely understand that sentiment, but I hope you'll humor me for at least a few episodes on the will because I believe that the topic is far more important than that. And I'll quote Martin Luther on this point here because I think he summarizes the importance of the will pretty well. Luther says, quote, "Therefore, it is not irreligious, curious, or superfluous, but essentially wholesome and necessary for a Christian to know whether or not the will does anything in those things which pertain unto salvation. Nay, let me tell you, this is the very hinge upon which our discussion turns. It is the very heart of our subject. For our object is this, to inquire what free will can do, in what it is passive, and how it stands with reference to the grace of God. If we know nothing of these things, we shall know nothing whatever of Christian matters, and shall be far behind all people upon the earth. He that does not feel this, let him confess that he is no Christian, and he that despises and laughs at it, let him know that he is the Christian's greatest enemy. For if I know not how much I can do myself, how far my ability extends, and what I can do Godwards, I shall be equally uncertain and ignorant how much God is to do, how far his ability is to extend, and what he is to do toward me." End quote. Now, a little caveat here. Luther he doesn't come across as the nicest guy. His writings are a bit harsh, and especially as he gets older, anti-Semitic and other sorts of things. Some people think that Luther went crazy at the end. But even before he kind of went off the rails there, he wrote in a harsh manner, and others did too in that time. I mean, it was a relatively common thing. But when I was reading Luther and Erasmus in preparation for this, Erasmus had a much different character, the way that he wrote. And as a person, as a human being, I think I would have liked Erasmus way better than Luther. Luther was not a person that I think I would have liked. He's very much, if you're familiar with like Reformed sorts of people, the stereotypical like Reformed apologist people, that's probably Luther. I think they embody him well, it seems, at least what I glean from his writings. So I'm not saying that I like the way that Luther writes. I think his let him not call himself a Christian if he doesn't care about the free will, or he's the Christian's greatest enemy. All right. He's probably being hyperbolic, but it also wouldn't surprise me if Luther really meant that. So that's nuts, right? I think that's ridiculous. Nevertheless, what Luther says, I think, is very true in the main point that understanding the will is extremely vital. Now, Luther is saying it's vital in relation to salvation, sure, right? There's a saying in the church that I grew up in. Some people would say, "Hey, before you can present the gospel and get people saved, you have to get them lost." Right? The notion that, like, if you don't know you have cancer, you're not going to take chemotherapy, or you're not going to go get surgery to remove the tumor and all that stuff. You have to know what the problem is, and what the extent of the problem is so you can get an accurate prescription. And that's what Luther's saying about the will. Like, if you think that you can just will yourself to do all of these things, and then you need God a whole lot less than some other people might think you do. Or your remedy, your solution to living more morally, for doing the right thing, for growing in your spiritual disciplines, your solutions are going to look a lot different if you think it's just mustering up your will. Whereas if you think that the will is a whole lot more constrained than that, or you think that our natures are different than what libertarians would think, then that makes a big difference in how you go about living life and doing things. And so Luther is spot on here. If we don't understand our wills, our limitations, and what shapes us, then there are so many things that we won't be able to understand about who we are, who God is, and how we are to meaningfully act in the world. If you play any sports or board game or card game or anything else, you have to know the bounds, right? If you catch a football pass and you run outside of the sidelines and then back in and go into the end zone, you didn't score a touchdown, even though you made it to the end zone, because you went outside the bounds of the game. And so it's absolutely vital that we know what the bounds are, because if you don't, you're going to find that you think that you can do things that you actually can't, and you're playing a different game. So hopefully that's at least enough to intrigue you to come back for, let's say, the first 3 episodes after this, where we talk about the will. Hopefully that will pique your interest enough that you'll give me a shot to at least make you think a little bit more about the will. And then come back a little bit later. I think around episode 10, I'll start making more of a positive case for what the will actually is. And you can jump back in there if you want to skip the other free will things. But really, understanding the will is going to be important as we start to broach ideas of how did sin enter a good world? Is God able to escape the claim that he is the originator of evil because he created the world the way that it is? It's going to touch on a lot of different topics. Following our look at the will, we will move into a look at the origin and nature of evil. What is evil? Is it just a social construct, as a naturalist might say? Is it illusion, as some Eastern religions might say? Or is it a privation, as some lines of Christian thought might declare? And with an understanding of what we're discussing when talking about evil, we'll then work through some theodicies which attempt to explain how a good, powerful, and benevolent God might be compatible with the existence of evil. And after all that, we'll round out the season by working through the implications that the existence of evil has on our lives and how we can move out into the world implementing the seemingly foolish means of God with hope, despite the suffering and evil that we know we're going to face. I'm hoping this is going to be an interesting and fruitful season for you, so please come back next week and we will begin working through the human will. That's all for now. So peace, and because I'm a pacifist, when I say it, I mean it. This podcast is a part of the Kingdom Outpost Network. Please check out the links below to find other great podcasts and content related to nonviolence and kingdom living.